I welcome everybody, and I want you to know we have a meeting that we're not going to make any decisions. It's much more about conversations and exploring and seeing how we might be of help to URI in general. We're a committee established by the Global Council of URI, and we're in the process of reorganizing. We used to be the President's Council, then we were kind of in limbo as a senior advisory council, and then we've decided to get serious and by January the 1st, be ourselves in a new way. So I want to welcome everybody, and especially I want to welcome Vanessa and Bertrand and Heidi and Biff. And could I get Heidi? Could you say a few words about yourself? We've seen your resume, and it's impressive. But we'd love to hear your voice and just say a little bit about what you've been doing on the earth through these years.
Oh, I think I'm kind of an odd duck for, in terms of my background. There are a lot of people with much more impressive backgrounds than mine, Bill. Yeah, I mean, my background was, I was very interested in the corporate world in terms of business, and I was always trying to balance that with my interest in social causes. And sometimes I've done a better job of that over my life than others. But I guess the thing that I have when I look back on my life, I'm 82, just about 82, is I think that the most fun I've had in my life was that I've taken maybe some chances or risks that for me have enabled me to have a lot of satisfaction. I was one of the first women into management at IBM a million years ago. Do the math, you heard my age. And I have all the arrows in my back to explain that event. But it was interesting because I was able to also help promote women in business, which for me was terrifically important since we didn't come from an era in which that was necessarily promoted. And part of that came because I was brought up in a family that had a lot of emphasis on social justice. I went on a freedom ride to Montgomery, Alabama, when I was a sophomore at UCLA. And it was certainly life-changing for me. There's no question about it. And influenced a lot of the decisions that I have made in my life. So, so I did that, and I enjoyed IBM a great deal, but I ran into a glass ceiling I couldn't crack. And so I left and went into the Valley, Silicon Valley, and did some interesting things, I think, there as well. Bill knows that I helped co-found one of the really early companies in artificial intelligence. And so I'm finding what's going on in the world today and how that's evolved to be very interesting. But anyway, so I did that, and I helped found a business where I was started doing business in China in the early 90s. So I'm part of the problem we have. It was when China wanted to become the manufacturing platform of the world, and they were willing to take an itty bitty company like mine. So, I've been doing that, and I've been involved in education for a long time, as well as right now, I'm on the board of ARCS, which gives grants. And that's how I met Jill, who helped Bertrand and me make Bill. And it gives awards to kids that are getting their doctorates in STEM and and medical research. So, I've got a pretty varied background, but as I said, I've tried to balance between what I was doing professionally as well as trying to help other people around me. Is that enough, Bill?
That's beautiful, beautiful. And also, when we finished our conversation over lunch, you said something about what good could I be to URI? And
Right.
yeah, I
I
remember.
don't have some of the fancy backgrounds that the
Well,
rest
I
of you
tell you,
guys do.
it's very interesting. I'm sure that people are listening very carefully to what you say, and we'll figure that one out. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Perfect. Let me turn to Bertrand. Could you tell us a little bit about where you've been?
I spent most of my career under the radar. And what I've been doing is really connecting ideas, people, technologies, and create some symbiosis and collaborations and cooperations in a variety of subjects, areas.
What about your birth?
Oh yeah, well, come on. You went to Annapolis, but you were the first person ever to be in the Holocaust and graduate from the Naval Academy.
Well, there were two, Bill.
But I made my career in the
Yeah,
military.
he made his career in the military, the only one to do
20
that.
years,
Yeah.
20 years. So I guess that's a significant position to have.
And could you say just a little bit more, because you're involved in a lot of interesting ideas. Could you just say a little bit more about yourself?
In terms of my current activities, I'm very much involved in keeping track of evolutions of AI. I've even tried to make a contribution, maybe to recast what URI, what the acronym means.
Yeah.
And in my activities, I've looked at various possibilities, one of which has identified several aspects as to what can be done. And one of them is reconciliation, standing for the R in URI. And it struck me that it addresses not only amongst cultures and religions, but also with the environment. And it even allows for extraterrestrials to participate, actually, if you think about it. Anyway, those are kinds of things that I've been toying with and trying to
Well,
get some understanding.
we have some time. That's the beauty of the SAC. We have some time to explore some thinking. And I want to say to the other people, when Bertrand mentioned at lunch, he said, I have a tough time with URI, United Religious Initiative. What about all the other people who are not religious? And doesn't that turn them off? And of course, we've had this conversation a lot over the years, but one of the things that you made me do was to think the purpose of URI is threefold. One is promoting religious harmony. One is ending religiously motivated violence, and one is creating cultures of peace, justice, and healing for the earth and all living beings. And I was thinking, if we have three parts to the purpose, should URI be, it should stand for three different things. Maybe it ought to stand for promoting interfaith cooperation. Maybe it stands for, as you say, universal reconciliation initiative. And maybe the last part, the culture, would be the URI, YOURI, having to do with global kinship with all creatures in the environment. Maybe we ought to expand the headline of URI, but that kind of thinking we don't get a chance to do. And This is the SAC is a nice place to do that. But I thank you for that, Bertrand. Let me move on to I don't know if Vanessa is here.
I'm here.
Oh, bless your heart. Okay. We
Hi.
had lunch at Jack London Square.
Just me and you, no one else. There was some
Yeah,
soul
nobody's
things
in the
out there.
restaurant. They were all scared. Where are
Hi.
you now?
I apologize. I literally just landed in London, so I'm in a hotel room right now, and I got off a plane just a few hours ago. Starting a big adventure. I'm just here for a month, and I'll share what I'm doing because it involves URI. But just a little bit about me. I'm not originally from London, but what a beautiful city, and it's sunny and 70 here. I originally am from New York City. I've been living in the San Francisco Bay Area for the last almost 30 years. For the last 21, I've been involved in residential real estate. I operate a brokerage. So does not really have much to do with religion. So I get what everyone just said. But within the brokerage, I started that. I took over a company that had been around for about 40 years, and I've been running that now for the last almost 12. And part of that, actually, I put together a nonprofit that's called Roof. So we do a lot of community engagement, a lot of work in social justice and education and the unhoused. I was introduced to URI by way of Barbara Shannon, who has been my coach for many years with her CEO group, and found the concept really fascinating. And I'm really honored to be a part of it. Really, really excited. Background, undergraduate school, I was involved in the administration of justice and did a lot of social justice work, and then went off the path and went into real estate, which really very, very different track. But it's really gotten me very engaged, I think, in the community. And just, a part of it that you never really hear is just getting so very involved in what is happening, whether it's the local politics, the crime, the successes, the schools. You get so engaged in where you live. And I'm from now Oakland. I've been there for going on 17 years, raising my family there. This trip is very significant for me. I'm actually just on the first of, I hope, many sabbaticals, but I took a month to come here to the UK and on to East Africa. I'm meeting with some of the URI colleagues in Uganda, which I'm very, very excited about. And I'm also, I kind of broke my 17-year-old son out of his senior year, and he is joining me, which he's very excited about, not going to school, but really more excited about the opportunity to go to Uganda. We're going to continue on and do some conservation work at the Congo border, and then also in Nairobi, in a school that I've gotten very familiar with in doing fundraising and potential future design in the slums outside of Nairobi. And I'm really very excited to have him to join me and to, start getting exposed to the world and to charity and giving back and to kind of all the inspirational things that comes with building community within conflict. So that's a little bit about my background, and I'm really excited to meet all of you.
Good. Well, it's wonderful to have you get off the plane in London and get on this call. We're very exciting. Thank you. And by the way, real estate has a lot to do with religion. Over the years, people have big fights over religious sites and et cetera, et cetera. Real estate is a big deal in the Bible and in all the religions. But anyway, wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
The fourth person who is going to be joining the Senior Advisory Council, really for the second time, is Biff Barnard. And Biff has been with URI for a long time. Biff, could you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. Thank you very much, Bill. It's great to see everybody. I graduated from college in the Vietnam era and ended up to try to stay out of the draft. My first job was in the development office at Stanford University, where I'd gone to school, and And then I went to my boarding school in Connecticut and was director of development there for 3 years. And then got into business with some friends, starting a restaurant company here in California. We grew it nationwide and sold it to Stouffer's Hotels. And I then started a company that ended up being the largest SBA lending company in the country. We started it and grew it and sold it to Heller Financial. Some of you older people might remember Heller was a finance company out of Chicago. And as I say, grew it to be the largest non-bank SBA lending company in the country. I then got into subordinated debt and private equity, investing in middle market companies nationwide. And then started my own M&A firm, focused on middle market companies, mostly in the West. And through that, I always thought my nonprofit time was going to be Stanford and Taft, where I'd gone to prep school and where I taught and was a director of development. And I came to the decision that, I wasn't going to be able to make the kind of contribution to those schools that they're looking for alumni, and started looking for a nonprofit to get involved with. A lot of friends introduced me to different great nonprofits in the Bay Area. Nothing really grabbed me. And by total happenstance, I was introduced to a guy named Bill Swing, who at the time had started URI about 2 years beforehand. And as he was telling me about URI, I was looking for something where I could make a difference in an organization that was making a difference. And as Bill's telling me about URI, I'm not particularly religious, which Bill likes to tease me about, but I said, here's an organization that's brand new. It's going to make a difference in the world. And I've done a lot of fundraising, both professionally and as a volunteer. Maybe I can help. And so at the end of lunch, I said, Bill, I'd love to learn more about URI. And about 3 weeks later, he called and introduced me. He said, we're having a meeting of, then was an advisory council, became the senior, the president's council. But at the time, he said, would you come and meet some of the people involved with URI? And I walked into this meeting, and it was the who's who of philanthropy in the Bay Area, many of whom I knew. And I said, if these are the kind of people that Bill's gathering around him, there's got to be something to it. At the end of the meeting, I said, I'd love to learn more and love to get involved. And shortly thereafter, he invited me and my wife to the first Global Council meeting in Seoul, South Korea. And I went to that meeting, and through appreciative inquiry, sat down with people who were so totally different than me. And to a person, they'd say, I've been in URI I've been in interfaith my whole life. And for the first time in URI, I found an organization that's changed my life. It's changing my community, and it's going to change the world. And they're in tears. They're so passionate about it. So that really got the hook in it for me. And after that gathering, I said to Bill, I'm not going to be able to give the kind of money some of these other people have given, but I'll get involved. And over the next 10 years, I helped Bill found what became the President's Council and now the Senior Advisory Council, served on that as a volunteer for 10 years. And about 10 years ago, Bill and the then executive director asked me if I'd be interested in joining the staff as Director of Institutional Advancement, helping with fundraising and sort of general administration. And the time I was 70, I said to they gave me a job description. I said to my wife, if somebody asked me what my job description would be in my ideal part of my life, the last part of my life, I said, this is it. And so I retired after 40 years of business and joined the staff as Director of Institutional Advancement. A while later, the then executive director retired, and I became the acting executive director for a year, headed the search for the new ED, Jerry White. And for the last 2 years, I've been serving as a senior advisor to Jerry. And a couple of months ago, I retired from URI. But I retired from the staff of URI, but I very much want to be involved. And so I asked Bill if that he'd consider having me come back on the Senior Advisory Council. So deep background in fundraising and in business and founding companies, working on advisory groups for various government and non-government agencies, and am absolutely passionate about URI and its mission. I've had an opportunity to meet people in URI all over the world, and I'm thrilled to be asked to rejoin the SAC and work with you all for the betterment of the organization.
Great. Thank you so much, Biff, for all the years and all the work, and for rolling your sleeves up, man. John Weiser, do you have your hand up?
I don't have my hand up. I'm trying to get myself back. The video. Lost my video.
Oh, okay. Lost your video. Okay. Jerry, you're the executive, you're the ED of URI, and you just heard 4 people. Do you want to give them a welcome or say a word?
Sure. This is super exciting when we see the new recruits, but also we're all into the environment and recycling. So Biff is a great example of coming full circle back to the SAC. It's like you can't leave the family, the mafia of URI. And as people say, Bill Swing is very hard to say no to. So when he comes knocking, people join the circle. So welcome to the circle, all the newcomers. Heidi and Bertrand, after meeting you at Circles of Light, it's such a pleasure to be here. And Vanessa, you joining is really exciting. And then the others we brought in on the last meeting, from Roger and David and Lijo. I know that Steve couldn't join right away, but thank you so much. And Poulin, recycling, or actually never leaving, but moving into different rooms of the house, if I mix my metaphors. Bob Coleman as well. So I feel like we're in Jill Kramer and John being sustainers of our URI work. So I feel like we're already among family, and I'm super grateful just to have this time together, and as we rebuild the SAC, to be a force of nature. So welcome, and thank you.
Good. And if anybody ever wants to say anything, just raise your hand. You know how to do that. Either just raise it, or that little thing down there that puts up a yellow hand. That would be great. Thank you, Jerry. For everybody, let me just give a brief history of the Senior Advisory Council. When I retired as Bishop of California, I went to work in the URI office, and it was very clear that nobody walked in the door. The people who worked just came and went in their little cubby holes and worked and then went home. But there was no flow of other traffic. There were no other people coming in. And I thought, gosh, there are just a lot of resourceful human beings out there in the world who ought to walk through that door and help us out. And so I asked the Global Council if they would allow us to have a president's council. I was the president, and they said, okay. So we started that in about 2008. And that group did an awful lot. For instance, they traveled the world. There are people on this call who went to Jordan, who went to Seoul, Korea, who went to Kuala Lumpur, who went to all over the world. And there were other people like today, Vanessa in London. Some people say, well, if I'm going to be in this in Africa, what CC could I go visit? So some of our President's Council people have visited CCs all over the world, and come back and let us know. The one big contribution we've made to the program of URI is that we took one little part of the original charter of URI, which said individual members. And nobody had done anything about individual members for 20 years. So we said, well, why don't we push? So we began to have meetings on the subject. We had a retreat on the subject. And finally, not only did we create the individual membership, but Jill Kramer funded it. And now when we're on meetings with people from all over the world, they'll say, well, this person in Africa is an individual member, not a member of the CC. And this person over here is an individual member. And now it's just part of the ordinary life of URI. But that came out only because of us. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. And because of us, we had a summit at Stanford University. And we had people from the United Nations. We had General Mattis. We had all kinds of people who showed up. And the URI family got together because of us. We got the place, we funded it. And with the executive director, we got the program together. So 2 years ago, there was a meeting and they decided, well, let's stop having the President's Council because we got to get into conformity with ways that organizations are usually set up. So they're not set up with a triangle of President's Council, Global Council, and staff and ED over here. We need to get rid of the President's Council as the central body in there. So we became just an advisory group and not with independence. So that lasted for about 2 years, and we were losing members, and we didn't know exactly what it meant to sit around and be an advisor if nobody asked you for advice. So thanks to Jerry, Jerry made sure we got a charter together and made sure that we could elect our own members and make sure we could have our own meetings and have our own, we're not challenging the basic structure. We're just a little committee over on the side, but we get back to what the President's Council was all about, which was bringing people in the door, into the family. It's a portal to bring in resourceful people who have a lot of experience in running things in the world, etc. So we're reconstituting the SAC, and we're giving ourselves till January. And last time we got together in the summer, we had 4 wonderful new members, and today we have 4 wonderful new members. And in December, we're going to have 4 wonderful new members, and in January, we'll have a new everything. We'll get started in deep earnest come January the 1st. So that's where we are. We have a steering committee made up of Mary Cranston, John Weiser, Bill Fuller, who can't be here today. Sorry, he's at another meeting, and Pulin Sangvi. So we have terrific people. And it says here in the charter, the purpose of the SAC is to serve as a resource offering guidance, expertise, and counsel to the URI global network, including the ED, the Global Council, the Executive Committee, and the URI senior staff. So that's a very broad and welcomed kind of job description for us. So that's the history. Does anybody have a comment or a question? If you do, please raise your hand. I was really glad to see that over in Dubai that Lijo had wanted to know a lot about governance and a lot of the background. So I know that somebody out there is taking a deeper look at who we are and what we do, and that's very welcomed. So I don't see anybody's hand. That's always a scary thing when you're in charge of a meeting and you're hoping somebody will speak. But we'll move on.
I think Bertrand has his hand.
Oh, Bertrand, yes.
Yes, I was intrigued. You mentioned Dubai. Who was our representative in Dubai? Because Heidi and I were planning to visit Dubai to see my old neighbor, actually,
Me, yeah,
Sheikh
Lijo.
Fatima and Al Zayed, who's now passed.
Oh.
Anyway,
Lijo?
who is a person?
So we can connect you with Lijo Chaco,
So-
whose hand is up there.
Would you, if I may ask a question, how is Sheikh Fatima doing? And we were planning to go there. Actually, was it last year? And Heidi had a problem with an eye
I do
retina
not know.
issue, and we were unable
I do
to
not know.
make the trip. But anyway, the thought was that will the family, do you have connection with the family where they might
No,
participate in this?
I
I see.
no, I don't know that. I came here just about
Are
a
they
year ago.
interested? Would they be interested in this organization in any manner?
Don't know. No idea, actually.
I see. Okay.
Lijo,
Just
could
wanted to
you
know here.
just say a word about yourself in Dubai? What are you doing there?
Yeah, I came here about a year ago. I am handling the Middle East and Africa regions for a pharma food and nutrition company. Yeah.
So when you go there, he'll give you a tour of the town.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful.
Good, good.
Last time I was there was 1992, and it was
Okay.
a lot different than it is now. And I'm keen to discover the incredible
it's still
progress
hot.
they've made.
So maybe you should come next month, end of next month. It's
Anyway.
42 still, yeah.
Oh,
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 boy.
wow.
Thank you.
Good. Now, having gone through the SAC history, now I'd like to turn to a very specific thing. URI has a lot of, we have regions around the world. We have 7 regions. And we have one region that covers all the regions. And we also do indigenous work. We're probably the only big international interfaith organization that really works with indigenous people. And we have from the beginning. As a matter of fact, when this call is over, we're on a call with an indigenous conference. But I want, Jerry has recently been to Honduras. I'd like you to tell us about what you saw and what was happening down there.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. It's welcome again and exciting to be able to share some of our innovation and initiatives. Just as you started to introduce me, like a whole slew of cleaners and contractors just entered the house. So tell me if there's too much noise behind me. But I prepared a few slides, but I wanted to make this like a learning opportunity for us because it's a new initiative that we did in Central America. So I sort of want to walk you through, what does this have lessons for other regions? Even when you visit regions, do you think about fundraising and follow-up from those visits? And how can we decentralize some of our fundraising efforts as we are in terms of our program initiatives? So when I first came to URI and I made a visit, my first visit was with Indigenous and the Latin American team in Brazil. So that was in October 2022, and really wanted to reach out because, as Bill said, the Indigenous voice was present at the very beginning of URI, making it a rather unique interfaith umbrella that welcomed all faiths and traditions and spiritualities and none. So that was very promising. And those who were with us at the beginning as Indigenous groups are super proud. They were taking a big risk and being criticized because religion had been such a negative force in many of their lives and in the tribes and the communities that have faced what I call religicide, genocide or cultural genocide at the hands of different movements. So we've kept that strong and front and center. And so after that, I realized, well, where are our networks in Central America? We don't have a coordinator there. I didn't see any growth. You look at the country I'm going to describe, like in Honduras, we didn't even have one visit or one CC, one cooperation circle. So I thought, oh, maybe after COVID, where we've sort of been on a status quo, this is an opportunity to reseed the network and start like planting CCs all around the world and getting them to work together. So of course, in the age of Zoom, it's made easier post-COVID, but also requires lots of good face-to-face work as well. So I'm going to run you through a year in the life of URI. How did we come to Honduras? Why do we think what we're doing is important? And hopefully you guys will have some ideas and be able to be advisors and counselors as I go forward. So I'll share a screen to walk you through some of the material if I have it correctly. Let me know if you see what I see. Yeah, so it's sort of, so a year in the life of URI seeding change. So as I said, around October of last year, we had begun a conversation with a new donor who had never heard of United Religions Initiative. Her name is Jessica Sarowitz, from Honduras originally, but also grew up in the Chicago area and has been living there and in California for many, many years. And she and Steve Sarowitz, her husband, because of paychecks and other success in business, are a relatively new billionaire family coming from the Midwest. And they're interested in interfaith. And she is interested in particularly, her husband is a Jewish convert to Baha'ism, and she herself is a Latin American or Central America Catholic. So they had an interfaith marriage. They're interested in what we have to do. So we called her up. We hired someone who had an in and a relationship with Jessica. We sat down and started to meet up. So the first thing was, do you have a donor who can underwrite a special initiative that covers our training and, maybe can help us plant new gardens and CCs, in this case in Central America? So at first the donor was like, Honduras, Honduras, Honduras. And I'm like, no, we're bigger than Honduras. When you get a donor and they try to tell you what to do and where to be, it's our obligation to also educate donors and saying, well, we'd like to expand beyond Honduras, make sure we include indigenous communities. And she had a couple nonprofits that she supported in Honduras, and some charities, including an orphanage. So we had these conversations. Next, she's like, okay, I'll pilot. I'll take a chance on you all. $100,000 bet. Can URI grow and replant something in Honduras while broadening the outreach across Central America? So that was October of last year. So the games began. We got the $100,000 after a proposal, and we started our outreach with our indigenous communities, webinars, recruitment. And it was clear that the common theme was one of our specialties. How do we prevent violence, especially in a country like Honduras, which sadly or tragically is known as the murder capital of the world? Like it's ranked in the top 1 to 2 or 3 over many, like the last decade or so, as the highest number of homicide rates in the world. So we knew that they didn't understand themselves as religious violence per se. It's mostly a Christian Catholic country with plenty of gangs and lots of violence that are become accepted as the norm. So we introduced different people. We scoped a visit in January where Maria Crespo from Argentina, with her Spanish and her understanding of URI, went to go find consultants and scope out some sites for us to do some work. And then actually found the first group in Honduras to apply to be a cooperation circle. And they said, everyone she met, she goes, I don't know, we're like an interfaith virgin. Like that was their words. I don't know what you say in Spanish, but we've never heard of this. We've never done interfaith or interreligious, primarily because they perceive themselves as a dominant Catholic Christian. But there are Pentecostals, there are atheists, there are indigenous. There's much more diversity in Honduras, of course, than what the dominant cultural mindset was. So they were excited, like their eyes were opened, and they said, come on in. I think we can do some together, and we do have to work on violence prevention. So we auditioned the first Honduras CC, who I'll show a couple pictures on. And we completed by April our first training in the health approach to violence. And then by May and June, we followed up and expanded beyond the main cities to 7 municipal level, countryside communities who wanted to meet and started to plan with the indigenous an unprecedented gathering of 30 indigenous from across Central America, Latin America, but 15 of whom were from Honduras. So 15 Honduras, 15 from like 7 other countries. Again, historic. They had never met, most of them had never met before face to face, and it would cut across, 10 different tribes, I believe. So this is just so you know, like in 1 year, we have accomplished an enormous amount, went above and beyond the call of the original $100,000, but actually are in renewal conversations with Jessica Sarowitz about not only renew, but maybe actually do it in other regions or grow to bigger work in Latin America. So this was both, about fundraising, about staying true to our priorities and educating the donor, and then working with our partners and finding places who have never, most people around the world have never heard of URI and have never heard of the health approach to violence prevention. So that's where we are innovating. Let's see if I can.
Wow.
So then we have these 30 participants in the first training in April 24th. And so you ask, well, what is, Jerry, what is the health approach? Some of you have heard about it, but the science of health, the health approach to violence is that violence behaves like a disease and it spreads, it's contagious like a disease, like an epidemic. So the interventions to detect and contain and reverse an epidemic of violence that's so heavy as in a culture or country like Honduras requires some of the same approaches we took for COVID. How do you find the hotspots? How do you isolate? How do you mask up? How do you separate like perpetrators or spreaders from the population? But in a public health approach, you don't make it about bad people, like this violent, we hate this president or this prime minister. You're actually nonpartisan, like public health. It's not about bad people. It's about bad behavior that is contagious. And it affects, women and girls across these countries even more than others, even though the men are being violent, but the casualties often in war are civilians, including families, women, and children. So one of the quick quotes from our first introduction to the health approach was like, this is so important. We were teachers, community organizers, social workers, and we are facilitators, and we touch the lives of our students who come from very violent homes, and we must know how to help them and prevent further harm. So again, thinking about violence, there's personal violence, even like suicide or domestic violence in homes. There's interpersonal and community violence. And then there's structural violence with discrimination against Indigenous and women and others. And there's cultural violence, in a sense, accepting the norm that, violence has been around since the Bible, or violence, in many countries, we see people throwing up their hands and accepting the norm that violence is normal and inevitable, which it is not. And that's our health approach. So after doing the sort of science of violence with like secular NGOs and communities, when we spoke to the indigenous groups, they did not want to do they participated and watched the Western teaching, but they talk about, we work in circles, we work with each other, we work in seasons, and we work with a calendar of Earth holidays that are not yours. So let us have a second track that is a pure indigenous approach to how to adopt a health approach or the science of violence, but done on their terms, in their way, by them, without Western interference. So this circle here is a gathering that I only got to meet after their days of meeting, where people were making their offerings and they were putting forth a manifesto for us of what they had learned without us. So again, trainings led by Indigenous for Indigenous, we respected that. Learning tools that were new on violence as contagious, and facilitated, there's Rosa Delia over the left with the colorful hat. She and Rosalia are either they've served as trustees at URI or they've run CCs, cooperation circles, where they live, and they were the ones doing the training, and it translated beautifully, we were told. I wasn't there, but according to all accounts, they were tip-top training facilitators for the Indigenous to get everyone to learn and start to practice together. The appetite was triggered at the very end. I was invited in to a morning fire ceremony. It was just me and Maria Crespo, who are non-Indigenous, as they made the transition from their 4 days of learning to welcoming other Western trustees and partners. So this was at the fire ceremony, started at sunrise. And so the pictures give you a flavor that even the venue, the indigenous communities wanted to choose. There was more outside, not a conference room, not a bunch of squares, not a lot of windowless banquet rooms in hotels. So this was picking a very like organic, eco-friendly hotel where a lot of the work was actually done in circles outside as opposed to the traditional workshop in a room or in a box. And at the end, their manifesto was really reminding URI of its promise to support and stand with the survivors of religiously motivated violence, that they have been with us from the beginning. They have been most hurt, most in every country around the world, including North America, as we know. So they feel honored to be in solidarity. You see on the picture on the left, on the very right, the woman who with the dark hair is Jessica Sarowitz, who was talking to them of how proud she was of this investment as a philanthropist. But she herself was a Honduran woman who had experienced violence and has tribal and indigenous ancestry. So the identification to have an authentic like supporter and funder living in America who cares enough to come and show up and speak their language and dance with them in their circle. This was very beautiful. It was very like, it's vintage URI, shall I say, authentic to the core. And then I turn and I go to meet our first CC in the Virgin of, Honduras. And this team on the right, you see Maria Crespo in the white dress on the far right. 2 people in is the name of a woman named Yessi, who's the head of the CC. I don't know the Spanish, but COEAS. It's a plant nursery on the edge of this mountain. And they are replanting burn spots and attacks on this mountain that they call a sacred mountain. That's the lung of Tegucigalpa, of the capital of Honduras. And it hasn't been developed, but people are starting to burn forest. Plants try to set up shop, extract from it. And the ownership of the land is in dispute. So this lovely NGO on very little money per year taps into volunteers from high schools and colleges to do plantings of saplings. So when a tree is taken down, they replant. And they have people they call the guardians of the mountain in the CC, where constantly 4 to 7 people who circulate and roam the mountain to try to interrupt violence against her. But that's not enough. And in fact, it's very sad that one of the guardians, Mero, after we had the CC, was killed. In fact, he complained to the authorities. He tried to advocate for protection and change in ownership. He was found dead in the church, like a week after going to the authorities. And there has been no follow-up to solve his homicide. And I heard last week from Maria, 2nd death. So when we think about URI and its interfaith loveliness, it takes courage to be on the front line, to campaign to protect Mother Nature in an interfaith way that they hadn't seen. So we love the new member of our family. And we also know it's not enough to have one CC in a country. We've done a study that showed we need clusters of CCs. When you have 5 to 7, it starts to work. So that's it. I just want to say we reached out again for youth. We find that our results and impact assessments show that women, indigenous youth are critical to the formula that makes URI work. So wherever we go, we visit with universities. Here's a bunch of marketing students at the largest business school in Honduras. They were willing to start CCs among youth. And they had, again, never heard of the health approach to violence, which we were introducing. And so this is part of like a day in the life or a year in the life of URI. And I'll stop my share, in part because the vacuum is starting to come up. So I'll try to listen to your questions, but I'm about to be surrounded by hammers and vacuums. So I apologize. I hope you could hear and get the gist of my excitement for this new initiative or pilot initiative. And Jessica has circled back, met us, and actually now wants, I think, we're working, negotiating a renewal of the project and growth that could end up being doubling or tripling the size of the grant, and then later maybe replicating in other regions where Jessica has interest, including the Middle East. We'll see. So it's good news. I hope you get a flavor of URI, from start to finish, and also an opportunity to have benchmarks to measure. We want to measure our impact. So we have all this exciting activity. I can't now say we've stopped murders or that we've saved the mountain, but our eyes are on that prize. and how to set up RCCs for success. I hope you can hear me. I better mute now.
Yeah, Jared, do not worry about us hearing you. We hear you. That was great. That was really great. Yeah, anybody would like to make a comment? Please raise your hand. Yeah, is that, yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
I'm curious about two things. One is, Jerry, what in this 4-day health seminar were you teaching people to do? In other words, I understand the mountain. That makes perfect sense to me. It's not as clear to me what was being taught in that 4-day seminar when you're doing, the health violence training. What were people being asked to do, to learn? What was the obviously violence is bad.
And Jerry is going from room to room to get away from the construction people, and now he has his new seat.
Sorry, I had to navigate a crowd, but my apologies for not hearing the question with the activity, but I'm all yours now.
Okay, sorry about that. I was curious, in that 4-day health approach to violence, what you were training in that, or the organization was training these people to do. What was the outcome? What are they supposed to do after the training?
Right, good idea, good question. So I thought, again, witnessing 2 of the trainings, some of them had some more advanced training and some nothing at all. So it started with very baby steps that I thought, really? What is violence? What is violence for you? Where do you violence in our bodies, in our homes? And in one training, it took probably 2 hours before, while they were naming different types carefully, wondering if they were gang members or other reporters. It's very sensitive when, again, Westerners are in the room. On more than 3 occasions, I was told, Jerry, get back in the car. Leave the group, or no, you're not going to lunch. So because even when you went in the countryside, people know who's who. If you're a stranger or a big white guy like me, I'm a target. So but it was starting with suspicion. And once it got more comfortable, it was safe to talk about violence, then it was oh, it's personal, interpersonal. Everyone knows they don't say gang, or they say in the communities. It's like an elephant in the room that people are still afraid of. So at first, and then it started to land on machismo and the culture. But they would say, what about, so it came up as a coded conversation about masculinity. So I was very, and it was a slow burn. So just to say, the starter kit of a community outreach moment to see whether people would join the training, backed into it very gently, very quietly. And then men and women and intergenerational talked about, yeah, there's problems in homes, in our communities, and an admission of violence, an admission that everyone in the room was affected by violence, had experienced it personally, and even at home. So I, almost from a social work point of view, it was very simple. And that was sort of the first session, which is just, can we say the V word? Then in more advanced sessions, or let's say second day or third day, you're getting into the science of the health approach, what happens to the brain, how children mimic it, and that if you've been exposed to violence, you're more likely to be a carrier of violence. So what about healing and breaking the silence of violence and breaking the pattern and the cycle? And then it started to be about, oh, how do you interrupt it? So then there were sessions on something like navigating difficult conversations, stopping hate speech. How do people, it shows up online, it shows up in bullying, shows up in schools, and some role plays around that, how to interrupt. So some of this is basic. For me, I was wow, this is really starting at the basics, defining, and very participant-centric, experiential. No, there weren't books or readings ahead. Some people in these communities are also not literate. And so it's not a heavy bookish or science. So it's science-based and evidence-based, but made applicable to the community. And one of the women with us grew up in gangs in Chicago and was the leader of several and made a lot of money, but she's now out of gangs. So people who have been perpetrating of violence, and she's fluent in Spanish. So she was one of our trainers. So she can say, oh, I grew up with the same problem in Chicago. And I experienced and had these many relatives killed. And I actually participated in, but I didn't want to go to jail and lose my children. So from a very personal testimony point of view, was able to go in and gain their trust that here was someone who was steeped in violence, spoke their language, and said, we have it in Chicago too, and it's awful. And then this is what we did to stop retaliations, et cetera. So I would say it's very incremental, like I would say intro to violence, and then 101 and 202. And we'll see, we've just started at that level in Honduras.
Good, 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 good. Let's see, Vanessa has a question about, does URI create blueprints of work like this to use in other areas? Where does all the information get stored to repurpose?
Super great question. And we partnered with, I hired Karen Volker, who's our director of violence prevention and partnerships. So no one does this alone. We don't want to recreate the wheel. So our model grows out of another Ashoka fellow that I've known for 20 years, Gary Slutkin, who founded, he's an epidemiologist who really invented this approach that now has been tested in, cities across the world. So we work in partnership. They have some of the best science and WHO level work, if you're looking for that. But in terms of developing and adapting those materials to most basic communities, that's what we're working on now. And it's custom. So last I would say, the approach is science-based and there's similarities, but what we do in Northwest India with a particular tribal violence that we've been working on in Manipur is different than what we're doing with like Boko Haram and Nigeria communities, which is different than I described in Honduras. So they're the same in introducing a nonpartisan approach, but we're developing the tools and the materials, can send you some, and it's really under the directorship of our new staff member, Karen Volker, who's been with us about 18 months now.
Great, great. Thank you, Jerry. I wanted to make sure that at every meeting of the SAC that we are exposed to some of the work, the actual work on the ground, so that we're not just talking uprooted talking, but to have rooted talking. So so that was facts. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce everybody to one more cooperation circle. Oh, but before I do, let me say just a word. In 1996, we were at the Fairmont Hotel, and we 55 of us from around the world, and we were saying, well, a United Religions Initiative is not going to work with the Pope and the Dalai Lama and that sort of thing. It's going to, the people at the top, it's not going to work. But grassroots people, let's go for it. And let's go for grassroots people of all the religions. And some other people say, well, why not indigenous traditions? Because the indigenous, some of those traditions have been around longer than religions, some of the religions. And then somebody else said, well, what about spiritual expressions? So we said, okay, let's go for the whole thing. Religion, indigenous, spiritual. Let's go for the whole thing. You're going to open the door, open it wide open. So once we did that, indigenous people from northern Russia to Manipur to every place come in and find a home in URI. So that's been one of the deepest, richest things that we do. Now, let me introduce you to one other cooperation circle. It's one called Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons. And what happened was in 1908, George Shultz and Bill Perry, Secretary of State, or Secretary of Defense, and Thomas Graham, Ambassador, and Ambassador Jim Goodby, and a great physicist, Sidney Drell, who's a big friend of Andrei Sakharov. We got together and said, let's start a cooperation circle around nuclear weapons. That's a pretty prestigious group of people. quite in contrast to that. The cooperation circle that you just saw is different than the cooperation circle we started. And over the years, people have died, and then other people not as in that kind of category of global leadership, but people who are deeply committed. So we got a cooperation circle called Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons. We've met every month, 12 months a year since 2008. We have about 25 members. Along the way, we said a prayer every time we got together, and that was called our nuclear prayer. And people got excited about our nuclear prayer and took it to the United Nations, and that prayer has been used all over the world. And my phone is ringing, and I'm going to have to outlast it. If you can take it, I can take it. So we finally decided, well, let's have a nuclear prayer day for the world on August the 6th. And this year we had our third nuclear prayer day, and hundreds of thousands of people in countries all over the world are either writing their own nuclear prayer or using our prayer. And then we decided, well, let's bring young people into this. So we give a youth award, and this year we gave it to an African young lady who works in New York with the biggest organization for nuclear disarmament in the world. And so our little group of 20 people, some in Slovenia, some in India, some in wherever, we're all over the world, but we meet every week, every month. We're devoted to the cause. I just wrote a book on the subject, just preached a sermon on it this week, and we're all doing our part to make sure that we hold the nuclear threat up in the air so people can see it and feel it and respond to it. So it's just a little cooperation circle of 20 people now, and we've been around for 18 years. But I want you to know that I want to introduce you to another cooperation circle. And if you want to see our website, it's a pretty good website, by the way. You could go to Voices, we're called Voices, just voices-uri.org. And if you want to be informed about the subject, that'll help you get informed about the subject. And if you want to get in touch with us, we're easy to get in touch with. Bob Coleman, go ahead.
How do you get a copy of the book?
Oh, bless your heart. The book is on Amazon, and here it is. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Let's see. Just go to Amazon, and it's called God and Nuclear Weapons, Meditations at the End of the Atomic Age. And all the money goes to URI, it goes to Voices. I'm not getting rich off of this. And neither is URI, as a matter of fact. Any other comment or question from anybody? If not, that's so much.
Bill?
Yeah. Please, I can't. Oh, Bertrand, yes.
Yes, I want to ask Jerry a question about where else he's active along these lines in South America or Central America.
Sure, we can shift.
And what are your plans for others? Because I have a possible suggestion that might take up.
Great. Let's set up a call, because I'd love to actually introduce you and list where we have those cooperation circles and priority targets for the coming year, and then see where the overlap is. So I will follow up with you and Heidi on email.
Yeah, I was just off the top, maybe doing anything in Panama or Guatemala?
Oh, yeah, Guatemala were stronger than Panama. And in Latin America, like Brazil and Argentina, were stronger than, as I mentioned, in Central America. So Honduras, I think we have a couple CCs in Guatemala, which could help.
Yeah, we may have some ideas for Guatemala, if that would help.
Perfect. Thanks, Bertrand. Now back to nuclear bombs. I can't wait to read your book, Bill. Many of you know that, or not any of you probably, that for the first 10 years of my professional life, I worked on nuclear non-proliferation and tracking mass destruction weapons programs. It's one of those light topics that people love to talk about. But when I first met Bill, I was so grateful that you or I had a point of view of this massive, indiscriminate, and colossal threat to humanity. And he's been consistently a spiritual and human voice on this. So one of the reasons I really have looked up to you, Bill, from the first time I met and learned about your work.
Good. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. Now, let's get into Bob Coleman. I'm sorry. Barbara Shannon can't be with us today because her sister in Cooperstown, New York, is in the hospital and ill, and so she sends her regret, and we send our prayers back for her sister, whose name is Mary Beth. Mary Beth. And what happened, every 2 years, there's a big election, and we elect a chair of URI. And we also bring in people who are not elected from different regions, but we bring in at-large trustees into the Global Council. And I'd like to read you a little bit about a background of these people. First of all, Eric Rue is the new executive director of URI. We've had Rita Simmel, Jewish. The first one we've had Yolande Trevino, who was indigenous. We had Karen Bali. And then we had Prita Bansal, who's spiritualist. By the way, they're all 4 women. They've always been the chairs of URI. This is the first time a man has ever been elected.
Jerry, you said that they were the executive director. They were the chairman of the Global Council he was referring to.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. The chair of the Global Council. And Eric is currently the president of the European Interreligious Forum for Religion and Freedom, vice president of the European Office of the Church of Scientology. He's been invited to speak at the OSCE, Council of Europe, the Parliament of Europe, United Nations, and at the United States Capitol. So he's been with URI for some years and a very active person in Europe, and was elected as our 5th chair of the Global Council and went to work this month. So it's all brand new. At large, we had 6 new people. One is Vanessa Bergmark, who's on this call. You've heard from her earlier. Another one is Lijo Chaco, and he's on this call, and you've heard from him earlier. As you can see, there's sometimes a path from us to the Global Council or to leadership in URI. Third person is Francois Foot, who is from West Africa. She's a young lady who's taken our courses in violence prevention. And we're very glad to have her. A new person is Rabbi Michael Sebak. He's the Director of Communications at the Center of Christian Jewish Understanding at Sacred Heart University. And by the way, before his ordination, he created some of the biggest campaigns in the world, including still running Gillette campaigns, the best that man can be. He's much in demand for interfaith work around the country. Another person is Vincent Luong, whom we've known is from Southeast Asia for years. He's a partner, trainer, and consultant in at the Wholesome Academy there. And he holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. And the last person is Ejida Zakmund, who was born in Jordan to a Palestinian refugee family, moved to Palestine. She has a BA in business administration and marketing from Bethlehem University, where I visited, by the way. She's business and nonprofit sector for 10 years. She became a certified 200-hour yoga teacher in 2013. And she founded the first specialized Palestinian yoga studio. She's a mother of two and passionate about getting others on the journey of self-discovery. I'm very happy that we have Jewish and Palestinian people on the Global Council now. By the way, we've had listening sessions where we have people in Gaza, and URI people who are there, and we have listening sessions where we hear them. And we have people in Israel, and we have listening sessions where we hear them. And Jerry's gone over and been with them, and they maintain their relationship with each other in the middle of all this. So their pain is felt throughout our community, and I personally am very pleased that we have a Palestinian and an Israeli on the executive, on the Global Council for the first time ever. So that's that. Now let me go to Bob Coleman and fundraising. Bob, what can you tell us?
You know, this was an exciting summer for URI. And at one point, the Global Council appointed two brilliant young people, Barbara Shannon and Bob Coleman, to do a deep dive on URI cash flows. Revenues for an NGO are really not revenues as most companies would know it, but they're gifts coming from pledges. And sometimes the timing of the receipt of those pledges can be uncertain. URI is growing. It needs to grow. We need to fund that growth. And the fundraising in the past has been by people who are nominated to do that, but who are also wearing not one hat or two hats or three hats, but multiple hats. And it was just not an efficient way to fundraise. Our fundraising was a just-in-time kind of affair. And the conclusion that we reached was that it was appropriate to be more focused in our approach, more expansive in our outlook. And we have been fortunate in Jerry White, who is raised more money than any other executive director we've had, and seems to understand the process very well. My task is the Global Council decided that we needed to come up with a dedicated to fundraising committee, one which is that's the primary focus, and to do so over a period of years, not over a period of quarters. We'll be looking for fundraising talent both in-house URI and in the outhouse. So my task will be to explore the formation of this new fundraising committee, looking for 6 or 8 people. Presumably the talents, the people that are on the foundation board, on this board, will have the kind of talents and experience that we need. And by December 4th, our next SAC meeting, we'll be back to you with a selected group of people and the beginnings of a fundraising plan. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Can't wait to go to the outhouse and see who's out there. Biff.
I might just clarify, I mean, as you all know, most nonprofit boards are the primary fundraisers for the organization. URI is a little different in that our global council members, our board of directors, are local people from local communities around the world, and their expertise is peace building in their communities. They don't have experience fundraising. They don't have the contacts necessary for fundraising. And so I think what Bob is proposing is a way to supplement or complement their efforts in the field by having an organized group of people, many people on the Senior Advisory Council, to focus on fundraising. So Bob, I hope that makes sense? Is that your intent?
I'm glad that somebody cleaned up my remarks.
I've been doing with you for years, Bob.
Good. Bob, thank you so much. And thank you for all your dedication to URI. You spent so many hours the last couple of months, and we greatly appreciate that. We're heading toward the end of the meeting, and I would like to ask two questions of everybody. One question is, what do you need to know to be a better SAC member? And number two, what gifts might you be bringing to URI's work? Again, some people have been here, this is your first meeting, and some people have been here only the second meeting. So this is all new and you're feeling your way along. But I'm very serious about the question, what do you need to know to be a better SAC member? I'm really very interested in what especially the new people would say. Lee Jo, Vanessa, Roger, David, Heidi, Bertrand. What would help you be a better SAC member?
You know, Bill, from my standpoint, and I think this is probably true for Bertrand as well, we need just time to think about it and absorb before I think we could really ask questions that would make sense. I mean, there's some sort of odd sort of things that are in my head, such as when Jerry was talking, I was trying to understand how the organization is measuring success for these circles. And why am I asking that? Well, I mean, it's obvious if you want to think about how can you contribute, then you have to understand what is the measure of success, and I don't understand that. So that I know would be helpful. But that's just an example, and at least from my standpoint, I feel like I really need to chew on this. I mean, this is kind of information overload, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Does that answer, at least for me? Bertrand can speak for himself, of course.
Good. Roger, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. These meetings have been great, just my second one, but just starting to get a little bit of, I think, what Heidi was talking about, being a little immersion in some of the work and how URI works. I think for me, and this is partly, I think, how I think about how work happens in a lot of places, understanding more about how URI works. So the examples of the cooperation circles today, I think, were really, really helpful to me as examples of, in some ways, the work on the ground. I feel like in my role as a SAC member and trying to think about how I might be helpful, having an understanding of how the organization operates would be helpful to me. So I feel like there's like the examples we had today of work on the ground, and then Bill, you gave a nice description of the global council and the SAC structure, and kind of what happens, what's all the pieces in, not all the pieces, but what's the connection? How do things flow between the two? And what's the relationship? You know, where do things get started and where do things land? So things start from the ground up at the very local level, and then they become bigger things within URI. I'm sure it's a mix of these things, but things start kind of at URI global and then try to get sort of diffused out. So that kind of piece in terms of how the organization works would be helpful for me to understand over time.
Yeah.
And part of that is how I think how the money flows and where the money needs to come from to get to other places.
Yeah, and you know, the next time we get together, we ought to talk about money, you know, how it flows through URI. All those cooperation circles have to be financially self-sufficient. But then again, we have to get people in Africa, staffing Africa and India and Pakistan. So it does get complicated. Yeah. Let's try to map that out next time. Thank you, Ron. David, do you have any questions, any comments?
I'm to be honest with you, I feel a little bit of a disconnect right at this particular point from the organization, and I would like to see more involvement of the president or the chairs with the rest of us. I'm here in Israel, and these last 2 months have probably been the hardest 2 months that I have experienced. And especially the past 2.5 weeks, the day of Hirsch Goldman Poland's funeral, it was like Yom Kippur here. The country was silent. There was so much grief and agony. And I didn't see anything from URI with regards to this matter. Now, I don't expect, because there is so many issues with it, but the grief that this country was going through with regards to this, especially with two people that just have spoken so loudly to the world with regards to the hostages, and to watch the country, this country, go through that. It was, so I've experienced all of that here. I have not seen any sort of, I don't know what the connection is, how URI is helping and supporting with regards to that grief as well. So that's probably it. It would be interesting to have some more connectivity with regards to that from the chairs as well as from members of URI. So.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
David, what you're saying is to me is a big deal. If we're going to have impact in the world, we need to have a voice, and we need to find ways to make that voice heard in different ways in different places to different people. That's one thing. The second thing, and this took me years to understand. But URI is a grassroots organization. We say that, but what does that mean? It means that what we're doing is going to be slow. Because when we put together a CC, what's a CC? The CC is minimally 7 people. One of them has 100,000 people, but it's minimally 7 people with 3 different religious representations present among the 7. and you do something of value to the community. You dig a well, you teach women to read, you do all sorts of things of value to a community, after which the people who did it now have friends and acquaintances of different faiths that they didn't have before. And the expectation and hope is that next week you won't kill each other for religious reasons. It's a small thing. And URI is not going to have an impact in the world until we're much bigger. We have 1 million members. We need at least 1 billion. And the more people we get, the more of a voice we'll have. But the grassroots is a slow approach, but it's a long-lasting one and an effective one. Leaders of religions come and go, and their messages change. But if people from a grassroots level know, yeah, I know that guy, I think I won't kill him today. That's a big deal. It takes time, and we're trying to do that around the world. We're in 100 countries, but we may be in enough countries, but we don't have enough people.
I understand that, and I have heard the stories on both sides of this issue, from the far right to the middle right to those that are much more progressive in this country, sort of thing. And I've also heard from the Palestinian view here as well. So with regards to myself, I have not felt a whole lot of connection with URI. Now, I've done my own research with regards to all of this here, and I am connecting with members of the community and just listening to the stories, and the stories are horrific. And there's a lot of pain and grief on both sides. And I've had this story with had recently a long conversation with a former client of mine who is Palestinian from California, and a really, really hard conversation. And she knowing that I'm living here in Israel now, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your candor. And we hear the pain that's underneath that. Lee Joe, I want to make sure we hear from you. In terms of, what do you need to know to be a better SAC member, or what gifts might you bring to URI's work? And I know that you're interested in governance. That's very welcomed here. We spend a lot of time on governance issues at a certain level. So, but anything you want to say?
Over the last couple of months, I think I've been interacting with you. I've been asking questions. First of all, to know whether I fit in, because I was in the military for 24 years. And now, and I was part of the construction of the first nuclear submarine of the Indian Navy too. So a lot of divergences. Anyway, but I've been having conversation with you, Jerry, and another friend of mine called Sheetal. So I try to understand more whenever I have doubts. So I think I'm okay as of now.
Okay.
And and as far as governance goes, I will try to do my best.
Great, super. Well, I think there's nothing in the world wrong with leaving a meeting early, ending a meeting early. Jill, do you have your hand up, or are you just reaching for your thing? Oh, you're on mute, Jill. There you go.
No, I didn't raise my hand, Bill, but this is a constant problem. The concepts are so vast, and it's hard to know where to plug in. I mean, clearly we need financial support, and this group is very, very important to that. Yeah, there's a to-do list.
Yeah.
that maybe should be clearer. It's huge. Jerry's report was just incredible. The indigenous solution to ending violence with our formula was so hopeful. It was amazing. There's so much that keeps happening, and it's a lot of concepts to get your head around. And what in the world can one person do? Maybe that's something. Maybe our to-do list is something we ought to think about.
Yeah.
Individually. Anyway, I'm so pleased to see new members coming in to this group as we've morphed from signing the charter to where we are today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Thanks for this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, Heidi.
I was curious from David's standpoint, and again, going back to the way I think about things, measure of success, and then you figure out what you need to do to get there. And so I'm sort of curious as to what David thinks URI can or should be doing to try. I mean, clearly the situation is just horrific. I don't care what you think about Bibi, what you think about Hamas, what you think, I mean, we'd all be village idiots if we didn't say this, this needs to somehow work out better than it is right now. So I was curious, how do you think, David, URI could contribute or should contribute?
Good question.
I would probably, if we are a senior advisory group and we're all over the world, and the chairs are wanting to hear from us, or would want and realize where we are, I would hope that there would be some sort of connection to find out what's happening in the world, where we are at. What are we experiencing? What am I doing on this senior advisory board? And what am I doing in the position that I'm in right now here in Israel? So I would love to see more of that sort of connection, support both forward and backward and backwards. The flow in both directions. Sort of thing. That's what
Is there something specific to help in the horror show that you're living in right now? Is there something that URI specifically could do to be more helpful to you, to the Israelis, to the Palestinians with whom you're interfacing?
Let me think about that for a little bit more. I want to. This was just the beginning process.
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand. And of course, I'm such a newbie. I'm just, but I'm really trying to understand, because I think that, Bertrand and I talk about the fact that it reminds, Bertrand is a Holocaust kid. It reminds him of what was in the world, what was going on in the 1930s, and he's thinking, "Holy Toledo! We've got to do some kind of an intervention." And stop this, and you're in the middle of it. So I was curious if there was something practical that could be implemented that would assist you in achieving the goals that we're trying to get done. Anyway, I'm not expecting a thesis on this right now, but it's a question I'm asking, and I'd be very interested after you have a chance to think about it.
I will think about it and write something myself. Okay, thank you so much.
Also, I just want to add on that front, again, not always tying together funding, but I went over there in March. I was with David and met some of the CCs and was asking them similar questions, Heidi, like, well, there's the talking, there's the tension and the pain, there's a whole country frozen in grief and fear. But one of the things that has kept our Israel and Palestinian network sort of small is part of that, as if you have to start big, like having Israeli settlers and Palestinians like meet together. But the model on health approach to violence is a group has to deal with its own violence. So Israelis have to be having a conversation about violence amongst themselves and how to interrupt their own, Palestinians as well. And one thing we're missing has been a Israeli coordinator of the CCs. We just hired a data systems person, an Argentinian Jewish Israeli, who is now in Tel Aviv. So we have like someone working part-time. She wasn't hired to coordinate among the CCs, but just because she won like the global application for the job that we need on data and learning systems. So we have an uptick in presence, staff presence there. But when I brought Claude Bernstein, who may join at some point, I was introduced to him by Biff. Yeah, it looks like we came close to being able to make sure that the Palestinian coordinator on the West Bank and the Israeli coordinator, they don't have to be best friends, but they have to be present. They need support almost directly before they come together. And then the regional coordinator is thinking about planning in Turkey, where our CCs, Israeli, Jewish, Druze, whatever, can meet up in Turkey in a safe place, like URI creates safe place for reconciliation and meetings. So there are things I'm happy to talk about. They do require more, like we had in Honduras and Central America. We need actually like a jumpstart grant to bring some of these dots and strands together. So I'm happy to talk more about that with David and you if you're interested.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay. Well, this is an unhurried meeting. We had no decisions to make. We wanted to welcome people. We wanted to have conversations about what's really happening on the ground, and we did it all. So I think it's time to go, unless anybody has anything. Well,
Bill?
Yeah.
If I may, it's Diana. I just wanted to let everyone know that for the new members of the SAC, there will be an orientation between now and the next meeting. So please stay attuned to your emails for the orientation so that there's a lot of your questions and can be brought into these meetings. Okay?
Terrific.
Thanks.
Thank you, Diana, for all you do.
Thank you, everyone, for all you
Okay,
do.
thank you. We'll see you December the 4th. December 4th. Thank you.
Thanks. Good to see everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
London,
Get some
Thanks,
sleep.
everyone.
We're in London.
London,
Thanks.
Dubai,
Bye.
Bye.
Valencia, and every place.